They believed my brother. Over me and threw me out. Karma. Took 9 years. I didn't cry when my parents drove me to my aunt's house 9 years ago. I cried 3 years later, standing in a courtroom, watching my brother's hands shake as a pawnshop receipt with his signature on it got handed to a judge. That's the part I want to get to. But I need to get the rest off my chest first, so bear with me. I turned 13 on a Tuesday. My grandmother had passed 6 months earlier, and she left me a ring. An old sapphire thing, appraised at $5,000, that she specifically told my mom was mine. For when he's older, she'd said. Everyone in the family knew it. It sat in a small wooden box in my parents' bedroom closet, wrapped in a handkerchief, waiting for some day nobody had defined yet. At my birthday dinner, my older brother, 16 at the time, golden child, varsity everything, stood up in front of the whole family and said the ring was gone, and that I'd taken it. I remember the exact silence that followed. Not shocked silence, believing silence. "He's been in my room," my brother said, voice cracking just enough to sound convincing. "I saw him near Mom and Dad's closet last week." I hadn't been anywhere near that closet. I didn't even know exactly where the box was kept. But nobody asked me a single real question. My mom's mouth went thin. My dad's jaw locked. My aunt on my mom's side, not the aunt I'd end up living with, a different one, actually said, out loud, at my own birthday table, "Well, he has been acting strange lately." I hadn't been acting strange. I'd been 13. I spent that night defending myself to a room that had already decided. Every sentence I said sounded to them like something a guilty person would say. That's the cruelest trick of being falsely accused by someone people trust more than you. The harder you argue, the guiltier you look. My brother barely had to say anything else. He just stood there looking wounded and disappointed in me, like I'd let him down personally, and everyone comforted him for the burden of having a thief for a sibling. 2 days after that birthday, my parents packed 2 suitcases of my stuff into the car and told me I was going to stay with my aunt and uncle for a while, until things cooled down. The aunt and uncle in question were my dad's brother's family, people my parents barely spoke to and, when they did, spoke about with a specific tightness in their voice. I'd heard the word difficult used about my uncle more than once. I'd heard my mom call my aunt a lot at a Thanksgiving years back. I didn't know these people. I was being handed off to virtual strangers because it was easier than sitting with the discomfort of maybe being wrong about their golden son. Nobody said the word temporary like they meant it. Nobody said, "We'll figure this out." My dad hugged me at the door with the kind of hug you give someone you're relieved to see leave. I want to be clear about something before I keep going, because I think it matters for what comes later. I wasn't angry at my aunt and uncle when I arrived. I was scared. I assumed I was being sent to live with the villains of the family. Every story I'd ever half heard about them painted my uncle as short-tempered and my aunt as cold. I remember sitting in the back of their car that first night thinking, this is my punishment for something I didn't even do. I was wrong about them. I was wrong in a way that took me a long time to fully admit, because admitting it meant admitting how wrong everyone else in my life had been about who actually loved me. My aunt, I'll call her Denise, didn't hug me the first night either. She wasn't a hugger. But she made me a plate of food, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and said one sentence that I still remember word for word. "I don't know what happened with that ring, and I'm not going to pretend I do, but you're safe here, and nobody's going to accuse you of anything in this house without proof." Nobody had ever said the words "without proof" to me before. It hadn't occurred to anyone else that proof was a thing that should exist before a verdict. My uncle, Frank, was quiet that first week. He worked with his hands, ran a small auto shop, and didn't talk much unless there was a reason to. The first real conversation we had wasn't really a conversation. He just handed me a wrench on a Saturday morning and said, "Come here, I'll show you something." And that was it. That became our thing. Car engines, then home repairs, then how to change a tire in the rain, then how to talk to a bank about a loan, then how to shake a man's hand like you meant it. All the stuff nobody had ever bothered teaching me. All the stuff a dad is supposed to teach a kid. I want to be fair to my actual parents here, because I've turned this story over in my head for 9 years. Maybe they were scared of losing their golden boy's trust. Maybe they told themselves sending me away was cooling things down instead of what it actually was, which was choosing. But the thing about a choice is, it doesn't stop being a choice just because you dress it up as circumstance. The first month, I expected a phone call. I checked my phone constantly. Nothing. The first 3 months, I expected an apology, or at least "we're working it out." Nothing. By month 6, I stopped checking my phone as often. Denise noticed. She never said anything preachy about it. She just started including me in more things. Grocery runs, Sunday dinners with her side of the family, who actually turned out to be warm and loud and nothing like what I'd been told. Frank started taking me to the shop after school. I started sleeping through the night again, which I hadn't realized I hadn't been doing. By month 10, something had shifted in me that I didn't have words for yet. I remember the exact moment I understood it. Denise had a rough day. Some argument with a coworker. I don't even remember the details. And she came home stressed and quiet. And my first instinct wasn't, I hope she's okay because I'm scared of her mood. It was, I hope she's okay, full stop. I cared about her. Not out of obligation, not out of fear of being sent somewhere worse. I actually, genuinely cared about this woman who 6 months earlier had been a stranger with a bad reputation I'd inherited secondhand. I turned 16 at their kitchen table, and it was a real birthday. Balloons Denise clearly overdid on purpose. Frank got me a toolbox, an actual, good, you're not a kid anymore toolbox. And somewhere between the cake and the leftover pizza, I called her Mom for the first time. Not planned. It just came out. Mom, can you pass the... And then I stopped, because I heard myself say it, and I looked up at her. She didn't make a big thing of it. She just said, yeah, hang on, and passed me the plate, and her eyes were wet, and neither of us said anything else about it. That was the moment. That was when it became real for both of us. I started calling Frank Dad about 2 weeks after that. He made it easier by pretending not to notice the first time either, the same way she had. I think they'd talked about it. I think they didn't want to make it a big emotional moment that might scare me off from doing it again. They just let it happen and treated it like it had always been true. My real parents did not call on that birthday. They did not call on the one after that. Here's the part that still sits wrong in my chest, even now, even after everything. I graduated high school with honors. Denise and Frank were in the third row, Frank in a shirt he clearly hated wearing, cheering louder than anyone else's parents. My biological parents were not there, not a card, not a text. I graduated college 4 years later, top of my class, with an internship offer already lined up at a firm most people in that auditorium would have killed for. Denise cried through the whole ceremony. Frank shook my hand and then hugged me anyway, which broke our unspoken rule about hugs, and I remember he said, "Your grandmother would be real proud of you," which was the first time anyone had brought up my grandmother without also bringing up the ring. My biological parents did not come. My brother did not come. Nobody from that side of my family had contacted me in years at that point. Not a birthday text. Not a congratulations when I posted my diploma. Nothing. I want to say I didn't care by then. That would be a lie. I cared. I just cared less every year, because the people who actually showed up kept giving me less and less reason to keep a seat warm for the people who didn't. On my 20th birthday, I asked Denise and Frank if they would adopt me. Legally. On paper. I wanted my name to match theirs. I wanted a document that said, out loud, in a way nobody could argue with, who my real parents were. Frank had to leave the room for a minute after I asked. Denise just held my hand across the table and said, "We were hoping you'd ask. We didn't want to push." It took a few months to go through the process since I was already an adult, but it went through. I have the paperwork. I have a new middle name that's actually Frank's father's name, which Denise suggested, and I said yes to immediately. I joined a mid-size IT firm at 22, grinded harder than anyone else on my team for 3 straight years, and got promoted into a management role at 25. It wasn't luck. Frank used to say, back when I was 16 and frustrated about something, "Nobody's coming to save you, so get good enough that you don't need saving." I took that with me into every review, every late night, every project nobody else wanted. When the promotion came through, my company did a small celebration. Nothing huge, just drinks and a dinner with the team, and family invited. I invited Denise and Frank, obviously. I invited a few cousins from Denise's side who'd become genuinely close to me over the years. And, against my better judgment, at the very last minute, I sent an invite to my biological parents. I don't fully know why I did it. Maybe some small, stubborn part of me wanted them to see what they'd walked away from. Maybe I wanted one more shot at a version of this where they showed up and it meant something. I didn't invite my brother. I drew the line there. But my parents I invited, they came. I watched them walk in, dressed nicely, looking around the room like they belonged in it, and something in my chest went completely cold and completely calm at the same time. Denise squeezed my arm. She clocked them the second they walked in too. My mother came up to me at one point during the toasts, all smiles, already halfway into a sentence about how proud they were, and I looked at her for the first time in years, and I said, loud enough for the people near us to hear, "I'm sorry, Do I know you? She blinked like I'd slapped her. It's your mother. It's Mom. I don't think we've met, I said. But thank you for coming to celebrate a stranger's promotion. My dad tried to jump in. Something about, this isn't funny. We're your parents. And I just turned to the small group standing near us. My actual boss, a couple of coworkers, one of Denise's cousins, and said, has anyone here met these two before? Because I genuinely don't recognize them. Every single person said no, because it was true. Nobody in my adult life had ever met them. 9 years is a long time to be a stranger. When the toast came, I stood up and I thanked my team, and then I turned and looked directly at Denise and Frank and said the truest sentence I've ever said out loud. None of this happens without my parents. Not the promotion, not the degree, not the person standing here right now. Everything good in my life I owe to the two people who chose to show up when nobody made them. I watched my biological mother's face while I said it. I won't pretend I didn't enjoy that part. My father cornered me near the coat check afterward, furious, hissing about how ungrateful I was, how they were my real family, how Denise and Frank had stolen me from them. I remember laughing, actually laughing, not for effect, just because the audacity of it hit me funny. You dropped me off at a stranger's house 2 days after accusing me of theft. On a lie my brother made up, I told him. You didn't call me for 9 years. You didn't come to a single graduation. You don't get to show up at my promotion party and use the word stolen. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't, because 2 weeks later, my brother finally resurfaced. Not to apologize, to try and get ahead of something. Denise and Frank threw me a small, no-reason dinner last week. No birthday, no promotion, just a Tuesday. Because, as Denise put it, we like having reasons to sit around this table with you. I sat there, looked at the two people who chose me when it cost them nothing to just not, and thought about the 13-year-old kid who got dropped off at a stranger's house because it was easier than believing him. That kid got lucky. Not because the truth came out, because two people he'd never met decided from day one that he deserved better than doubt. I got my proof. My brother got his consequences. But honestly, I stopped needing either of those things a long time before I ever found that receipt. I got what I actually needed the day someone finally said, "You're safe here," and meant it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating Reddit tales, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Archives of Reddit. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.